People with actual diagnosed mental conditions such as anxiety. How annoying is it to see people on social media throwing around the term so loosely? Anxiety has been in common usage far longer than it's been a medical diagnosis, so I have no cause for complaint with anxiety. Bipolar gets misused a lot though, and it's honestly rather annoying. What's more annoying isn't always the usage of the words anxiety, depression, panic attacks, PTSD, but how media portrays them. Suddenly people who are anxious have crippling anxiety, situational depression becomes clinical depression, and terms like panic attacks and PTSD are thrown around whenever someone experiences a mild inconvenience or has something bad happen. No, Stacy, having one nightmare about a dog that barked at you 2 days ago isn't PTSD. It makes it embarrassing for me to say I'm going to have a panic attack because some people will associate it with freaking out and being melodramatic, but in reality my brain is messing up its signals and I do feel like I'm going to die. When I say that my anxiety has prevented me from working, I get suck it up because they've seen that it's so easy and goes away because obviously their favorite character got over anxiety in 2 episodes. My fight isn't with them, it's with me. Depression and anxiety don't bother me so much. People may really be feeling depressed and anxious, have no access to psychiatric care, almost fit the diagnostic criteria. ADHD and OCD bother me more, because people usually significantly downplay those disorders. Forgot something or have a bit of trouble focusing. ADHD. Notice one tile out of order? OCD. IRL, those are very debilitating conditions. If the coping mechanisms I use also help them, I really don't care. Exactly. It literally doesn't matter at all if you're diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or if you just have a problem with anxiety sometimes. Nothing pisses me off more about the mental health community than the rampant gatekeeping, especially with things like anxiety and depression where they try to shun people who suffer it to a lesser degree than themselves into staying quiet. I mean, I'm on the spectrum and I have anxiety, but it doesn't really bother me that much. I do dislike when people use autism as an insult, or fake mental disorders for clout. I'll be honest, I don't really care. I have ADHD, and so does one of my kids, and if I had $1 for every time I heard someone say OMG I'm so ADHD, I'd have enough to pay out of pocket for our monthly prescriptions and then some. What creeps me out is when people find out I have it and low-key fish for tips on how to get a diagnosis because they want Adderall. Like I dunno, get mediocre grades all through school, be labeled as disruptive and get told every year how you're smart but don't work hard enough, never pay your bills on time, forget 30 to 50% of your appointments, drive away with coffee on the roof of your car approximately once a month. Lose your keys, lose your wallet, hyperfocus on deep cleaning your kitchen junk drawer an hour before company comes over and your entire house is a mess. These are the tips I have that no one ever wants. You keep using that word, PTSD. I do not think it means what you think it means. I have bipolar disorder, diagnosed about 15 years ago. It really annoys me how people will say casually they are so bipolar when referring to someone who isn't. The one that truly frustrates me is the condescending misuse of triggered. I have PTSD and triggers are real and the effects they have on me are serious, but I can't even talk about that anymore because it's just an ugly joke to most people. Overall, I wish people had more empathy and less judgment about mental illness. Depends on the mental health condition. I deal with depression, anxiety, and dissociation. They're pretty common and I think most people deal with them to a certain degree, so I'm not annoyed ever. But for others that have PTSD, OCD, ADHD, I could see it being more annoying because they're very misunderstood. I mean, I definitely had insomnia before I was diagnosed with insomnia, and considering that many people don't have health insurance or money for a therapist, it's hard to get a diagnosis. It took me 20 years of having insomnia before I could afford a diagnosis. I don't ever make the assumption that people talking about these conditions don't actually have it. It doesn't affect me, and it normalizes conversations about mental illness. Doctor here. Anxiety fits on a spectrum and can be used colloquially just fine as long the person doing so provides context for the severity and/or situation. Someone saying I have so much anxiety over finals week is just fine. Now someone claiming to have OCD, sociopathy or bipolar, manic depressive disorder is another thing entirely. When people call other people bipolar as an insult, like you all have no idea what bipolar is and how difficult it is to live with. Fortunately, people don't tend to self-diagnose themselves as schizophrenics. However, what there is a severe lack of understanding about the condition, which wouldn't be such a travesty if it didn't lead to an assumption of potentially murderous violence, which, in turn, leads to more attacks on the clinically vulnerable. I don't expect everyone in the world to understand every detail of every illness there is out there. That's ridiculous, but it would be nice if I didn't have to actually be afraid of being exposed anymore. Death threats, doxing, rough arming and assault that I have had over the years due to fears based in ignorance. I tell you what, it doesn't help with paranoia. I usually don't tell people that I have borderline personality disorder because of how negatively it is viewed literally everywhere. There are even therapists who won't help people with BPD because of judging all people who have BPD by the people with severe cases. People with BPD are often kind of harshly assumed to be monsters. So I usually just say I have bipolar type 2 since that's what I was mistakenly diagnosed with first. And I don't have a severe case. It's 15x less annoying than people who gatekeep mental illness, or act like someone doesn't suffer from said mental illness because they either hide their symptoms well, or manifest different symptoms than said person complaining. For example, some highly depressed people who are on their couch all day will claim that an extroverted person who's out all the time couldn't be as depressed as they say they are. Even though these depressed extroverted people may be out all the time because they can't stand to be alone with their own thoughts. It hurts and is frustrating. I'm bipolar and have a severe anxiety disorder thanks to childhood abuse. I see people joking about being so bipolar today because they're being indecisive or using as an insult, quit being so bipolar when someone changes their mind or dislikes something. Or just straight up calling me crazy when they find out I have bipolar. So awesome when someone tells me my husband is nuts or a saint for dealing with me. Like, no, you're not bipolar because you can't decide what you want to do for the day. I didn't want a genetic neurological disorder that causes hallucinations, delusions, no impulse control, severe depression, and has a rate of 60% of bipolar people attempt suicide. Gotta love having to take a cocktail of antipsychotics and anticonvulsants to stay stable. Each mood shift lasts for weeks to months and causes just a little bit of brain damage each time, so my memory is deteriorating. Oh, and unlike anxiety, THC makes bipolar symptoms worse and the effects can be permanent. No medical marijuana for me. I don't know if this counts, but I have Tourette's syndrome. I get pretty irritated when seeing people making fun of it on memes and joking about it. It really is a hard condition. You can't understand unless you have it. A little annoying when people don't take my shit seriously, but doesn't really bother me besides that. I have pretty severe ADHD that wasn't diagnosed till I was in my 30s. I've always struggled, spent so much energy trying to keep it in and have still succeeded in life. I now take medication that quiets so much of the noise in my head. When I took my medication for the first time, I think it might have been the first time my mind was quiet. I know what it's like to struggle with ADHD and have it actually diagnosed. To the IG girl who claims ADHD because she is just being lazy, buzz off. ADHD isn't dancing around your room like a maniac, it's crying in your hotel room because you couldn't focus enough and now you don't have a bathing suit or underwear for the week. It's annoying. I have anxiety and PTSD and everyone makes jokes about PTSD of Vietnam. I do get flashbacks and it is rude to joke about it. Apparently, people on TikTok are pretending to have autism. I have autism for real and it kind of upsets me because most of the time it just isn't like how they are acting it out on TikTok. Damn, I hate TikTok. I honestly thought people were making that shit up as an excuse to get out of work. Till about 2 months into the pandemic. Constant bombardment in the media, the shutdown, and a couple bad beats in my life suddenly turned into full-blown panic attacks and auditory hallucinations. Ended up on meds and talking to a therapist, and I'm probably back to around 90% healthy and the bulk of the physiological effects are gone, but I feel terrible about brushing people off up until that point. There's a huge difference between a valid concern for the future and actual physical manifestations that you know are caused by a mental disconnect and can't control. I can't blame people for not understanding it if it's never happened to them, and I wouldn't wish that shit on anyone. Too paralyzed by my own issues to give a damn. Anxiety doesn't bother me. I truly believe everyone experiences it at some point. What bothers me are the way bipolar, psycho, and even paranoid gets thrown around. I think it just gives people a very warped idea of what those terms really mean and dehumanizes those of us who live with them. Most people are shocked to learn my boring self, who is a responsible adult with her own meatloaf recipe and an understanding of how insurance works, is very bipolar, sometimes psychotic, and dealing with paranoia on an everyday basis. Bipolar doesn't mean moody. Psycho, tic, doesn't mean crazy. Paranoia is not super anxiety. Just because you experience some of the issues that affect people with ADHD does not mean you have it or have permission to make light of it. The whole point of ADHD is that it's chronic and affects the quality of our lives. Having the occasional blues or getting distracted for a moment doesn't mean you understand what it's like to have ADHD. Doesn't really bother me. To be fair, every single person has some degree of anxiety. It can range from slightly uncomfortable, no treatment needed, to absolutely crippling, get meds, they help. A lot of mental illnesses are on a spectrum. Someone's anxiety or depression may not line up with what yours is, but that doesn't mean they're faking it. Someone saying they're anxious or depressed about something doesn't mean they're diagnosing themselves with generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder. Also, not everyone has the resources to get an official diagnosis. We just need to trust them when they say they're struggling with something. It is annoying seeing people use OCD, bipolar, and ADHD incorrectly. Being organized doesn't mean you have OCD, having mood swings doesn't mean you're bipolar, and being hyper doesn't mean you have ADHD. These things dismiss what these mental illnesses actually are and make it difficult for people to take us seriously. I'm saying this as someone who struggles a lot with ADHD. I don't care at all. Mental health awareness is good, and you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Only if they're doing the treat me special by doing arbitrary thing that has nothing to do with my condition. It's not annoying at all. People generally don't fake having mental health issues. If they are faking having a specific issue, they probably have some other mental health issue and they're just confused, so they deserve empathy in that case too. I don't have any and it bothered me to no end. When people say something mundane triggers them, it just makes it that much harder for people who actually suffer to be taken seriously. Not anxiety, but PTSD. If one more person makes a triggered joke and doesn't have trauma, I'm going to make them sleep on a bed of watermelons. You know those Karens saying vaccines cause autism? They're acting like autism is a bad thing. Vaccines don't cause autism. I am young, but even I know vaccines do not and can't cause autism. I have generalized anxiety disorder, depression, and borderline personality disorder. No one pretends to be borderline. The other two? You can have them in milder forms where it isn't debilitating. Doesn't bother me. Not so much anxiety, but I see people who, because they go in moods, they're like lol so bipolar, and it annoys me. I don't have it myself, but I lived with someone who did, and trust me, it's nothing to glamorize. It's more annoying to see people claim the condition but then expect to be accepted exactly as they are without making any effort to change or improve the toxic aspects of their personality, especially as I have to do so much work on myself to control the more jagged edges of my various little insanities. You claim you're mentally ill? I'm sorry to hear that. But, you have to engage with available support and put in the work to get better at managing it. I know it's hard. Good Lord, I know. A mental health diagnosis is not a free pass to be an asshole though. Angers me greatly. I have ADHD. Shit is so hard to manage. But when I hear someone go haha sorry I fight the impulse to file their teeth with a horsehoof file. Google it, thing is brutal. Mental illness sucks. It's going to be misused, misrepresented, and self-diagnosed though. There's nothing I can do about. I don't want to step in and tell people they're wrong and what it's really like because I don't want to out myself. Social media has made me ashamed. Mental conditions shouldn't be used as adjectives and I completely avoid from doing so myself. I am not depressed. I'm so much more than depressed. I have depression. I'm not OCD. I'm not bipolar. My cat's not bipolar. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have bipolar disorder. I have a typical asshole cat. My OCD isn't pleased or calmed by satisfying videos. It makes some stupid fucked up thing pop in my head at an inappropriate time and I'll be disturbed by it deeply until the next one happens. My bipolar doesn't give me mood swings. I recognize that maybe some people experience this. But no. It put me in the hospital and messed my brain up so bad that I can't really remember a month of my life, but I bet it was embarrassing and I'll try not to think about it if my OCD will let me. My depression doesn't mean I'm sad all the time. I function fine when I have to, I'm just empty. Time is too fast and slow at once. I wake up each day disappointed and annoyed that I had to wake up. When I'm depressed, life is like a giant sigh. Not one of relief. One of, I'm exhausted 24/7. The way it's used makes no sense at all. You can't just say I'm so OCD which equals I'm so obsessive compulsive disorder. Also I hate propel going OCD heaven when it's just tidy or perfect. Also guess the __ has OCD when they just did a satisfying job.